Welcome back to World Insight. Let's go now to our second story today. It takes us all the way back to December 21st, 1988, when the small Scottish town of Lockerbie became known to the world. That day, a bomb exploded on Pan Am Flight 103 in the skies above. It killed 270 people. 20 years later, the Scots have made a controversial decision to free the terminally ill Lockerbie bomber, Abdul-Basit al-Megrahi, on compassionate grounds. It now enrages the families of the many victims and raises speculation about an oil trade.
Abdul-Basit al-Megrahi is leaving Scotland. Suffering from terminal prostate cancer, he had asked to be released on compassionate grounds. The request was granted after 8 years in Greenock prison. The only person ever convicted in the Lockerbie bombing is sent home to Libya to serve out the rest of his life sentence.
It is my decision that Mr. Abdel-Basit Ali Mohamed al-Megrahi, convicted in 2001 for the Lockerbie bombing, now terminally ill with prostate cancer, be released on compassionate grounds and are allowed to return to Libya to die.
Bert Ammerman lost his brother in the bombing. His reaction was anger and disbelief.
We've just released a man convicted of massacring 270 people. We've given state-sponsored terrorism a victory, and the families have to watch all this. And 20 years later, this is the last sad chapter in this odyssey.
On December 21st, 1988, Christmas in the small Scottish town of Lockerbie became a tragedy. Pan Am Flight 103 exploded 31,000 feet above, sending the jumbo jet and its 259 passengers and crew plummeting to Earth. Parts of the plane crashed into a quiet street, obliterating several houses and killing 11 residents. The casualties reached 270. 189 were Americans. It was considered the biggest terror attack before 9/11 in the United States in 2001. 3 years of investigation pointed the finger of blame towards Libya in 1991. In 2001, the former Libyan intelligence officer, Megrahi, was sentenced to life with a minimum term that was later set at 27 years. His conviction was largely based on the testimony of a shopkeeper who identified him as having bought a shirt in his store in Malta. Scraps of the garment were later found wrapped around a timing device discovered in the wreckage of the airliner. Last week, the hero's welcome for al-Megrahi in Libya added insult to injury for the U.S.
We have been in contact with the Scottish government indicating that we objected to this, and we thought it was a mistake.
And the U.S. fears the release sent a wrong signal to not only the families, but also terrorists.
The U.S. government responded strongly because they are under pressure from the victims' families and the public. Another reason is the Scottish decision has challenged the U.S. authority in defining terrorism.
And besides the controversy over the decision, there's speculation about a possible deal. Some critics have accused Britain of approving the release to boost business ties between Britain and Libya, which has the biggest oil reserves in Africa. Their claims gained strength from the comment of the son of Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi on the plane that flew Megrahi back to Libya.
So the fact of the matter, and this is something that is stated for the first time, is that in all the trade, oil and gas deals, which we have supervised, you were there on the table. Whenever British interests came to Libya, we would always put you on the table, and I would personally supervise this issue.
Suspicions were further heightened when Gaddafi himself expressed his thanks.
And I speak to my friend Brown, the Prime Minister of Britain, his government, the Queen of Britain Elizabeth and Prince Andrew, who all contributed to encouraging the Scottish Government to take this historic and courageous decision, despite the obstacles.
But London denied any involvement.
When I met Colonel Gaddafi over the summer, I made it absolutely clear to him that we had no role in making the decision about Megrahi's future. Because it was a quasi-judicial matter, because it was a matter legislated for by the Scottish Parliament and not by us.
Scottish legislators on Monday held an emergency debate as critics claimed Megrahi's release could severely damage relations with the U.S.
It was my responsibility to decide upon these two applications. These were my decisions and my decisions alone. In considering these applications, I strictly followed due process, including the procedures laid down in the prisoner transfer agreement and in the Scottish Prison Service guidance on compassionate release. I listened to many representations and received substantial submissions.
Megrahi's trial and conviction in 2001 led to a major shift in Libya's relationship with the West. This came after 11 years of UN sanctions to hand the suspect over for trial. In 2003, Gaddafi abandoned the pursuit of nuclear weapons and agreed to accept responsibility for the Lockerbie bombing. In 2006, the U.S. restored full diplomatic relations with Libya and removed the country from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Western energy companies have since moved into Libya to tap the country's vast oil and gas wealth.
In the Cold War, the Western countries forgot about Africa, but now they've turned their eyes back to Africa. 4 drives are behind it: oil, anti-terrorism, democracy and trade.
The shift in Western policy is obvious. 6 months after U.S. President Barack Obama took office, he made his first official trip to Ghana. 1 month later, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton wrapped up her 11-day tour of Africa. But the attitude of African countries towards Western countries has also changed. Professor Xu says the change can be seen in Libya's high-profile welcome for Megrahi.
Now African countries cooperate with emerging countries like China, India and Brazil and Russia more closely. This made the Western countries immediately try to keep their influence in Africa. African countries are more flexible and they have more choice.
For some, the truth behind the bombing is still a mystery, because Megrahi has always steadily insisted he's innocent. The top British cancer specialists who've examined him say he has less than 3 months to live. Megrahi is planning to write an autobiography that will clear his name. After more than 20 years, the shadow of the Lockerbie bombing has not gone away.